Briana Dinsdale is a young artist, but she's already released an album called Beginnings last year. She has a fantastic new single called Irresistible Force, and we're going to talk about that. Hello, Briana.
Hello, Sophie. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm pleased to be talking to you because I've had such a great time listening to your music, and you're a really interesting songwriter, and I mean that in a very positive way. So it's your song construction so cool. But we'll get to songwriting and stuff like that because your musical life started before eight. Eight was when you started performing. So I'd love to know what led up to you having your first performance at the age of 8.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. Thank you. I started taking piano lessons when I was 4 years old. My parents like threw me in the deep end. They're like, "Here, let's learn this instrument." And me and my attention span like were very hit and miss with the piano lessons, but I'm still grateful that I pushed through. And then when I was 8, I started getting vocal lessons, and then my singing teacher was just like, "Here's a little competition. Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "Sure." I was a little pocket rocket when I was 8, full of confidence and beans. And I was like, "Yeah, get me on that stage," even though I'd never done it before, and took off from there. It's bizarre, isn't it?
Did you enjoy it when you were 8, or did you get on stage and did the nerves overtake you?
From what I remember, I enjoyed it. But then there's also like home videos of me like crying, running off
Oh.
stage when I was 8. I'm like, did I enjoy it or did I not enjoy it?
Or was I just overwhelmed?
Yeah, overwhelmed. That was probably it, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, I mean, 8, eight's young to have the responsibility of performance, but did you keep doing things like that, doing competitions?
Yeah, I did that exact competition until I was about 13 or 14 every year. And like new categories would open. So that's when I started doing country, because they opened this category called the country section, and I sang Good Girl by Carrie Underwood for the first time, belting out Carrie when I was probably like 11. Um, but yeah, that's how I started doing country, was from that too, which is
Right.
really cool to think about.
So you didn't grow up listening to country then?
I did in some ways, but then I also didn't in some ways. I listened to more of the more modern country stuff. So listened to lots of Keith Urban and
Mhm.
Casey Chambers. But then I also listened to like lots of Eagles, the Chicks, Melissa Etheridge, like so many different artists. Mum and Dad raised me very well on good music. So grateful for that.
Well, they raised you and obviously your sister Ashlyn as well, because she is in your band.
She
So did
is.
you grow up playing music together, or is this a recent development?
We grew up doing it together. We would probably twice a week say, "Mum and Dad, we have a show to put on," and like
Wow.
ticket the door, make them buy tickets and come in and sit down and watch us like perform Frozen for 2 hours or something. It was probably torture, but yeah, we were always around music together and did choir. And we actually, the first song I wrote was actually the same first song my sister wrote. We wrote it together. So yeah,
Oh,
cool.
well, because she sings on one of the tracks on your album Beginnings, and also is in your band. So did you for a while consider being a sister act instead of you being a solo
Yeah.
artist, I should say?
Yeah, for sure we did. And we still all the time try and do some duo stuff. Like Tamworth this year, we did a lot of duo stuff. That was pretty much everywhere we went. We just played together because it's way more fun that way too. You have someone there with you. But she is such an incredible talent, and she loves playing the bass. But her goals are to do event management in festivals, which is exciting. So she's a very businessy girl, but whenever she gets a chance to play on stage, she'll do it. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a great combination of talents that you have, because if she's managing the festivals, then she can just program you on them.
Yeah, I mean, mate, keep
Yeah.
going, Ash, go do it right now.
I think it's fantastic. And there are a lot of country music festivals popping up. And hopefully people continue to go to live music and go to more live music, and there can be more festivals.
Yes, keep going to live music, people. If you're watching, go.
So as I mentioned, you released an album called Beginnings last year. And how long had you been working on that?
I think the process was about 10 months in total. I started working on it when I was 16, and it came out when I was 17.
Right.
Um, which I was so young and learnt so much in the process as well. Uh, and it was all during the pandemic. So luckily I got to work with a very local producer who was amazing, Louise Wheatley. so that was good. It was like 20 minutes down the road. Didn't have to do too much on Zoom because we were so close.
Mhm.
Uh, but it was a very, very cool, memorable, unforgettable experience. Yeah.
And I should also say you're in Queensland, or the liberated state of Queensland, as it was for a lot of 2020 and 2021. So if anyone's thinking, how did she go down the road to work on an album during that time? That's why you were in Queensland.
Queensland.
But still, it was that's a big decision to do that at a time when things were so up and down with the music industry. Did you just feel like, well, it's now or never? Or was it just, you planned it anyway and you wanted to go ahead with it?
It was interesting because I got a grant from my local council to help out with it. But we were actually going into it originally looking at it as an EP and doing just a smaller body of work. But then the more I had probably 15 to 20 songs sitting there, I wanted to work on, and then we kind of cut some out, brought some new ones in, and it ended up becoming 12 tracks just organically.
Mm-hmm.
So we kept it with that. But yeah, the grant was just a bit of a boost. And it also gave us a timeline where we said, this is where we kind of have to do it, which kept things flowing. Even in the harder times when we were a bit constricted, we found ways to work around it just because it's kind of what we had to do. And I'm kind of glad it did, because it could have dragged on forever. And then my creativity, as I mature, would change, and I would be like, no, let's scrap it all and do it again, which I'm glad we didn't do, because it keeps that organic 16, 17-year-old Briana in there, and then I can see it bloom as I progress, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But also I find it interesting that you're so aware of that potential to change, that you're not just thinking, oh, well, how I feel now is how I'm going to feel, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Got to be aware, because mum and dad were a huge help in making me become aware of that, because when you're 16, most 16-year-old girls are quite stubborn and knowing what they want to do. And so I'm glad mum and dad kind of pulled me into line and say, this isn't going to be what you want to sound like in 10 years probably. So we created every song to sound extremely different to each other, just so when I look back, I can remember how different they were, if that makes sense as well.
Yeah. So your parents musical?
My dad songwrites, and he plays guitar, and he sings as well. But my mum is not musical. She likes to take a lot of credit though, because when she was pregnant with me, she would put headphones on her belly with classical music and play music. So she takes that credit. She's like, I'm not musical, but I did this. I'm like, okay, Mom, that's fine.
She appreciates music, therefore she is musical. How about that?
She's the #1 music lover in the world. She will go to any gig she can, always buying the merch. She's the best. Yeah, best music supporter.
So at the age of 16, of course, you're at school and trying to fit all of this in around various other things happening. So did you, around your schoolwork, allocate time to songwrite and to practice almost like it was a job that you were doing?
Yeah, definitely. It actually, funny enough, was my job throughout high school. That was all I did was music. So I'd do cover gigs on the weekend and that to make money, and then royalty payments as well. But yeah, I would absolutely dedicate time. I remember it was actually quite lucky that we were in lockdown a lot, not as much as other states. I can't complain about what a lot of lockdowns were for Queensland, but having that time at home actually brought a lot of songwriting ideas, and some of those tracks are on the album. I remember, like a lot of people, I struggled a lot with my mental health throughout COVID. And there's a song about that on the album that I wrote when I was at my lowest in COVID at that point. And yeah, just having those times, I was definitely lucky that we were in a pandemic, because I had more home time to create the songs and write songs, rather than me being at school 5 days a week. Every day. I don't think I would have been as fluent in having time to write, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It does blow my mind though that at that age you could go and play gigs on the weekend and do your school. I think it's amazing, because I would struggle to do it now. So but I guess if you feel like, well, to borrow the name of your latest single, Irresistible Force, if you feel like music is an irresistible force in your life, then it's something that you just have to do.
Yeah, always make time for the things you love. So, and for me, it's not like always making time, it's just finding the time. There's always going to be time. But
Mhm.
it might not be every single day, but every few days, I try to find a block of time to sit down and be creative because it's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of being creative, writing songs, you mentioned that by the time you recorded the album, you had a few there, and you also said that your first song was written with your sister. So from the time you wrote that first song through to creating the album, did you just write a lot of songs so that you were constantly working on your craft?
Yeah, I wrote a lot of songs. I don't remember 90% of them. They're probably on record somewhere. Mum and dad would have them. Mum especially would have them somewhere. Uh, but I would enter a lot of like country music club competitions, and there was songwriting categories, and that's where I learned a lot of. Oh, sorry, there was just a bug.
Okay.
I'm not one with
Very
names.
annoying when they do things like that.
I'm like, not the time. um, and that's where I'd get a lot of feedback on how to keep improving my craft, which I'm very grateful for. And yeah, still where I can ask for feedback on my songs from professionals because I'm so young compared to these people who've been doing this for so long. So yeah.
But still, critiques can be hard to take. So did you have you somewhat developed a thick skin about them, or you just approach it with the sense of this is only going to help me?
I think it was different every single time. I have definitely have memories of me being quite upset over some comments, especially when it's something you've created and it's organic to you. Hearing like not so much negative comments, but when you're like 9 or 10 reading those things, it can be quite hard hitting. But as I matured and got older, I realized that it was all out of the goodness of the heart, just trying to make you a better songwriter. But you know, when you're so young, you're like, really? It's bad.
Well, especially if you say you're 9 or 10 when you're hearing it, that is full on. Like
Yeah.
but I mentioned at the top that I find your songwriting so interesting, and partly that is because every song went somewhere unexpected, not just lyrically but musically. And I was like, well, this is like a little treat. Like, I'm listening to this song, and obviously there are country pop influences, and we somewhat know what to expect from country pop songs, but none of your songs actually did that. So I'm really interested in your songwriting influences and how you develop that different sense of what your songs could be.
Yeah, well, thank you. It was a goal of mine creating the album to make sure everything was very different. And my style now, like back on the trend of what we were saying before, is as you grow older, your sound like expands and you realize more about your musical integrity. Now I've really kind of forced my way around what I know and want to continue my genre as, and that's country Americana with rock and blues influences. But at the time I was definitely listening to so much country pop and that's what I wanted to do. But now I'm kind of reinforcing it, merging it, still keeping those pop elements because you kind of have to this day and age. But for the album, I was heavily inspired by like artists like Maren Morris, Carey, Early Taylor, Keith, those kind of modern country pop. Now I'm inspired really heavily by the Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, Brandy Carlisle, Zach Brown Band, so many of that like different kind of country, you know, with different genres in there as well. And so I think it's about taking both of those and morphing it now to like I've got so much time, so I'm not stressed.
Well, except you were talking about the influences you had for the album. Your songs don't sound like any of those artists, so obviously you're able to take those influences and still come up with something that was yours.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely always wanting to stay organic and true to myself for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of the new, well, slightly new direction of your sound, or altered direction of your sound, however we term it, you co-wrote Irresistible Force with Melody Moko.
Yeah.
And it was a Golden Guitar winner. So I'm wondering how that association came about.
Well, I first became quite close with Melody at this songwriting thing called the Song Muster up at Gympie in August last year, and we bonded quite well. And when I wrote this song initially, I wrote it on my own. The morning after I got heartbroken, because it's a breakup song, like the morning after I got dumped, I just poured my heart out. I've said in interviews before, and I'll say it here again, it was gibberish. It
Right.
made no sense. And I listened back to it, but I thought it had potential. So I sent it to Melody and I was like, what do you think of this? And she was like, let's work on it. Come in, let's write, lay it down a demo. And I was like, amazing,
Right.
let's do it. And I'm so glad I brought it to her because there were so many elements we kept and just like reworded, and then elements we added as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, grateful for her. So grateful for her. Yeah.
And then it became a sort of package deal because her husband, Michael Moko, produced it.
Yeah. And he's a what's the word? Producer god. He's so good. He knows what he's doing. And he in the studio he got us to do these like crazy whisper things. He was like, "Can you just whisper the song?" And I was like, "Yeah." Like I was like, "Why?" But I did it, and then he would play it in the studio and it sounded horrendous. It just sounded like and then he sent the mix 2 days later and I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." Because he added all these cool things to it just to like fatten up the sound. So yeah, he's genius.
Well, speaking of musical gods, you are the 2022 Keith Urban Scholarship winner.
He is a musical god.
So I'm actually wondering what that entails, the Keith Urban Scholarship.
I still can't believe I was awarded that. I've never understood why me, but I'm so grateful. And it just means I get to head down to the academy in January, which was meant to be this January, but you know,
Right, yes.
that good old C word kind of like
Mm-hmm,
threw it away the like 5 days before as well. So that was a little bit, but now I'm going in January 2023 and go to the whole academy, get the whole academy experience. And it basically just means that Keith Urban's team is sending me, which is so cool. He's on my wall over there. And I've got him on a coaster. I'm a Keith Urban super fan, absolute super fan. So I bawled my eyes out when Sam from the academy called me. I was like, okay.
So is it something you applied for, or you just applied for the academy and then they actually chose you for the scholarship?
It was a little bit of a long process. So I've been wanting to go to the academy for years, but financially couldn't really afford it. Didn't really fit in with my schedule. I was always going on like this choir camp at the same time through my school, and being captain, it was like important for me to be there, and so many different factors. And so they kept emailing going, would you like to come to the academy? I was like, I really, really want to. Like I've been in tears over this. Like I want to go so bad. I just can't afford it, can't make it. And then Sam called me one day. I was at school, I was in class actually, and I always take answers on phone calls because you never know who it would be. A situation exactly like that, you don't know who it is. I was like to my dance teacher who was lovely, I was like, I need to take this phone call, goodbye. And like didn't even know who it was, answered. It was Sam, and she just told me, she was like, look, we know you can't really afford it and all that. We understand the music business. So Keith Urban and the Academy have teamed up and we want to give you this scholarship under his name. And I was like, and my teacher came out and she's like, thought someone's died or something, because I'm just like, I'm in tears. And but I was like, it's all good. And yeah, I'll never forget that day. It was so exciting, and I'm so excited for the opportunity to head down there.
Yeah, and that, yeah, it is a fantastic moment because, as you said, you're a Keith Urban fan, and yeah, I think it's yeah. But look, the answer to why you were chosen is in your album and in your latest single, I think. So, and I'm sure Keith knows what he's doing. Let's put it that way. So, you live in Southeast Queensland, and there's quite a burgeoning country music scene happening in Brisbane, as far as I can tell, a bit of the Gold Coast. Are you finding that there are more venues to play gigs in, and more people to play them with?
Yeah, it's really picking up here, which is really good. I think there's always been like the artists here, just no one's ever really known what to do with each other. They're like, what can we do? Like Big Sound Country was last week, which was just amazing. I was a volunteer up there. Me and my friend, Tyler Rodriguez.
Yes.
We both volunteered, and we both were like amazed at the amount of people from the country industry that were there. Right. Both from the business side and the performer side, and it was just a great gathering. But yeah, also in Southeast Queensland, there are so many venues opening up. The Beanley Tavern, which is very local to me, is becoming a go-to venue for artists of all genres, but especially country music. They're very supportive, and the local agencies and Yeah, it's really good. It's making me really happy and making a lot of other artists really happy as well. Yeah.
Right. Well, perhaps your sister can start becoming a gig booker as well, since she's
Yeah.
interested in it. There you go. Just some little business ideas for you. So now that you've released this single, do you have, I'm sure you have plans for more singles to come, but are you working on anything at the moment?
Yes. So I actually have a single coming next month, which I'm very excited about. And it's what kind of what you were saying before is like you don't expect the turn it's going to take. That when you hear this song, you will not expect the turn it's going to take. I'll tell you that. It's I've personally I've never heard anything like it. That's why I'm really proud of it and really excited for it to go in the world. I'll tell you the title. It's called Last Name. I haven't said it, but people can hear it. It's fine. I don't mind. It's going to come out at some stage. It's called Last Name. It's another breakup song. I got pretty heartbroken, so there's a lot of songs out of it. And then there's more singles in the future as well. Hopefully wanting to do another body of work like an EP or an album, but probably a little bit further down the line, maybe late next year or early 2024, hopefully. Yeah.
Yes. Well, there is, obviously you have lots of songs, so I have no doubt you'll be able to put an EP and or album together. But in the meantime, your new single is Irresistible Force. There is another single coming. People can find your gigs on your website, no doubt.
Yeah. Absolutely. We're doing a launch for the next single at that Beanley Tavern.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
just down the road. Briana Dinsdale, it was lovely to talk to you and find out about your music and how you've come to create it. And I look forward to talking to you again at some point in the future.
Thank you so much for having me, Sophie. It's always a pleasure being able to chat to pros like you. I love it.
Thank you.